Good day, everyone, and thank you for standing by. Welcome to the Teen Dating and Healthy Relationships in a Digital Age webinar. Today's webinar is being recorded. At this time, I would like to turn the webinar over to Jackie Rhodes. Please go ahead.
Thank you, and welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the National Resource Center for Healthy Marriage and Families webinar, Teen Dating and Healthy Relationships in the Digital Age. My name is Jackie Rhodes, and I'll be helping with the logistics for the webinar today, along with my colleagues Andrea Mitron, Kate Dumanian, and Resource Center Director Robin Senezal, who will be moderating the session. Before we get to the content for today's webinar, we are going to go through a few logistical items. The webinar today will be an hour and a half, ending at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time. The webinar will be recorded, and the slides, transcript, and recording will be posted on our website in the coming weeks. Audio for the webinar will be broadcast through your computer. Please make sure your speakers and volume are turned on. If you have any technical issues, problems seeing something or hearing something, you can send us a message in the Q&A box on your screen or call us at 1-866-916-4672, and we will be sure to assist you. Again, please make sure your computer speakers are on to hear the presentations. After the presentations today, we will have an online Q&A session. We encourage you to type in questions you think of at any time while presenters are presenting by typing them in the Q&A pod located at the bottom right corner of your screen and clicking Enter. We will collect submitted questions and then address those during the Q&A session at the end as time permits. If your question is for a specific presenter, please reference that when typing in your question if possible. Throughout the webinar, presenters may reference materials or links relevant to their presentations. You can browse web links by clicking on any of the links in the web links pod at the top right-hand corner of your screen, and you can download materials by selecting files in the downloadable resources pod on the right-hand corner of your screen. We will also be including several poll questions throughout the webinar that we encourage you to participate in by selecting or typing your response on the screen. We are excited about the agenda for today's webinar. The agenda will include specifically introductions of our presenters first, then an opening remarks from the Office of Family Assistance, a welcome and overview of the Resource Center, an overview of social media and the Dating in Real Life campaign, insight into identifying unhealthy relationships, and lastly, highlighting digital abuse. Following the presentations, as I mentioned, we will have an online Q&A session. When we close, a brief feedback survey will pop up on your screen. We encourage you to complete the survey to provide us with valuable feedback for improving future webinars. Once you complete the survey, you'll be able to download a certificate of completion for attending today's webinar. Before we begin, I wanted to briefly introduce our speakers. First, we'll hear opening remarks from Millicent Crawford, who is a Family Assistance Program Specialist from the Office of Family Assistance and the Federal Project Officer for the National Resource Center for Healthy Marriage and Families. She will be bringing us opening remarks on behalf of OFA. Robin Senezal will then speak. Robin is a principal with ICF and the project director for the Resource Center. Robin will be sharing more with you about the Resource Center and will also moderate today's webinar. Sarah Pichardo is the creative director at Family Bridges, where she oversees branding and marketing efforts and the creative process. She is a co-writer and the executive producer of the award-winning radio series Que Gente Mi Gente and the award-nominated theater production The Secrets of Santa Monica. She is a 3-time Telly Award winner and a Midwest Emmy nominee. We'll also hear from Annie Forrest, who's the engagement manager at One Love, primarily focused on the expansion in the state of Florida and wider policy-related efforts. She works with schools and community-based organizations to bring One Love's educational resources to Florida. And then lastly, we'll hear from Eleanor Davis, who is the program specialist for public education campaigns and programs at Futures Without Violence. In her role, Eleanor works on initiatives that aim to change the culture around violence against women and children on campuses, in schools, and in communities across the country. Eleanor came to Futures with a background in social justice and youth organizing and has deep roots in the world of theater and arts education. To learn more about our presenters, I encourage you to download the speaker information document in the downloadable resources pod on the right-hand portion of your screen. This document includes more detailed biographies as well as contact information for each speaker. And now, Millicent, I will turn it over to you to get us started with opening remarks. Thank you.
Hello and welcome everyone. I'm Millicent Crawford with the Office of Family Assistance, the Healthy Marriage Responsible Fatherhood Program. As part of the Administration on Children and Families, OFA shares in the mission to foster the health and well-being of families, children, individuals, and communities. So I'm especially pleased about our partnership that we have with the National Resource Center for Healthy Marriage and Families. And I'm so very excited about today's webinar, which is part of a series, Healthy Dating Leads to Healthy Marriage, because we all know about the intersection and the carryover benefits of young people using healthy relationship skills like effective communication in all other aspects of their lives, including school, work, family, as well as their dating and intimate relationships. So I'm confident that your participation in today's webinar is going to prove useful in the work that you do. So I do welcome you once again, and thanks for joining. So now I turn it over to you, Robin.
Thanks, Millicent, and thank you all again for joining us today. We are excited about today's webinar and excited that we've got some great presenters who are going to share some very relevant information with you about working with youth. So let's start off with talking just a little bit about the Resource Center. The Resource Center focuses on 4 skills that resonate as important in the context of family, but also in the context, as Millicent pointed out, of work, school, and community. We found early in this work that messaging is extremely important, and not everyone understands the impact couple of family relationships can have beyond the home. So what we mean by healthy relationship skills are, these are the core components of healthy relationship education, and they include interpersonal skills like communication and conflict management or conflict resolution, and these are transferable skills that are just as important in couple relationships, parent-child relationships, community, work, and school relationships, as well as the critical skills like parenting and financial education. Parenting and financial issues are the top 2 stressors that impact all families, but can be even more disruptive for low-resource families. And what we know about these skills is that typically we should learn these skills in our family of origin, but sometimes it doesn't happen that way. Sometimes these skills are not modeled. So the Resource Center works to integrate these skills into service delivery systems to make sure that families that have not had access to positive modeling of these skills can have access to these skills so that they can improve them. And it's particularly important for young people. So the National Resource Center for Healthy Marriage and Families offers a ton of resources. As you can see from this slide, our website includes a media gallery. We also archive all webinars, as we will this one, as well as our newsletters. We have an event calendar that you can find out about events that are happening around the country, and we encourage you, if you're aware of events that aren't on our calendar, please let us know so we can add them. We have a resource library that has over 3,000 research-based resources on a variety of topics related to healthy relationship education, as well as all of the different stakeholder populations that we work with. We also have a virtual training center, which is free and includes 7 different courses that you can log on, set up a profile, and participate in. And if you complete a course and pass the quiz with 80% accuracy, you can get a certificate of completion that can be good for CEUs. We also distribute a monthly newsletter, so if you're not on our listserv, please be sure to let us know so we can get you on the listserv so you get our monthly newsletter. We're also on LinkedIn and on Twitter and hope that you will connect with us in both of those areas if you are also on them. We also have developed a lot of stakeholder-specific and culturally responsive resources because we realize that in order to serve families, we really have to address families where they are and understand the nuances from a cultural perspective. We also realize that stakeholders need resources that speak specific to the audience that they're working with. So, for example, if you're working with child support cases or child welfare or youth and families, we have resources that speak specifically to those stakeholder groups. We have an array of toolkits, fact sheets, research to practice briefs, tip sheets, and guides, all of which are available for free on the Resource Center website. And we also have hard copies available. So if you need hard copies to share with your staff, please feel free to let us know that as well. So today we're really going to be focusing on youth, and we have created a special collection. As Millicent mentioned earlier, Healthy Dating Leads to Healthy Marriage is our special collection that focuses on youth and young adults. And we believe that this is particularly important, as I mentioned, because some of these young people have not learned these communication and conflict management skills. And young adults are more likely to cohabitate than marry, and those who do marry, marry later. And unfortunately, unmarried cohabitating couples are more likely to suffer domestic violence and unfavorable economic situations. So it's really important that we work with teens and youth to help them recognize unhealthy relationship behaviors and learn healthy relationship skills while they're dating. And that can better prepare them for those adult relationships that will be coming along in the near future. So one of the ways that we're reaching out is through our social media campaign, and we've been very blessed to have the opportunity to partner with Family Bridges on the Dating IRL, Dating in Real Life series of videos through Instagram. I think you're going to find this is a very exciting opportunity, and you will have a link up in your web links box to the videos so that you can check all those videos out. But right now I'm going to turn you over to Sarah, who's going to tell you a little bit more about that and about our social media efforts. I'll be back later to help facilitate questions. I hope you enjoy the presentation.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you so much for taking some time to join us this afternoon. I am going to be talking a little bit about technology and social media and the role it plays in the lives of teens and young adults, primarily those ages 13 to 24. But before we go there, I just want you to think back to what you did this morning. That moment that your eyes were closed, you were totally out to the world, you woke up and you did what? I'll give you like a second to think about it. What was that first thing that you did? If you're like 48% of the adults in the United States of America, the first thing that you did was you reached over and you grabbed your phone. If you're a teenager or a young adult, that number is 66% of you picked up your phone to see what happened while you were sleeping. Why? Because social media is the new breakfast cereal. You wake up in the morning, you pick up that phone, and that's what you do. So you no longer get up, do your daily routine, and then you sit down and you have breakfast. You've swapped out your cereal for social media. And I just want to take a quick minute and ask you a poll question. Not counting your working hours, how much time do you spend on electronic devices per day? So don't think about the time that you're at work in front of your computer, but before you go to work, after you go to work, during the weekend, how much time do you spend per day on an electronic device? So that would include TV, a phone, an iPad, a gaming device. It's none, 30 minutes or less, an hour, 1 to 2 hours, 2 to 3 hours, 3 to 4 hours, 4 hours or more. And I'll give you a few seconds. All right. Looks like about 22 to 23% of you are on there 4 hours or more. 18% are on 3 to 4 hours. 2 to 3 hours is about 30%. So let's go ahead and say that the majority of you are on there 2 to 4 more hours per day on an electronic device of some sort. Now let's take a look at what that number looks like if you're a teenager or a young adult age 13 to 24. What happens now when you're in this age group is that you are spending half of your waking hours on some kind of device. So 9 hours a day, a 13 to 24-year-old is on an electronic device, and 92% of those are on 2 devices at the same time. So you have something like someone watching TV or a Netflix show and scrolling through social media, or they're playing a video game and texting at the same time. So all of this media consumption is what teenagers are doing while you're at work, basically, if they're not at school. And what are they doing with that time? Most of them are either watching Netflix or Hulu or YouTube videos. They're either playing a video game, they're texting, or they're on social media. Now, I don't want to make it seem like all of this consumption is awful. There are some good things to it. There was a study recently done with a bunch of high schoolers, and they were asked what the positive things of being on social media were. The majority, 40% of them, said that they connect with friends and family. And I believe that if, we look around the room and we were to do our own survey, most of the people who use social media would probably put that on the top of their list. Definitely connecting with friends and family. It's easy to find out the news or information that way. I am guilty of finding out news by scrolling through Facebook. That's how I learn what's happening. A lot of them that say self-expression, getting support from others, learning new things. So there is a positive part to being connected to technology and also being connected to social media. So, however, just like everything, too much of something is hardly ever good. Too much social media, too much general media consumption, what's happening is it's distorting reality, right? So if you think back on taking a photo that you last uploaded to, whether it's Instagram or Facebook or whatever, Snapchat, whichever one you use, you probably took some time and some thought to get that picture to look picture perfect, right? So if you look at social media walls, rooms are always clean, desks are not cluttered, tables are clean. If you're taking pictures of your food, it's like your table is, super amazingly beautiful. There's no crumbs anywhere. So people are always on their best behavior. So if you're supposed to be having fun, everybody pretends to look like they're having fun. If you're supposed to be in some pensive mood, then you pose to look like you're looking out into the ocean and thinking about the meaning of life. And the camera angle is always, always good. And your lighting is always good. So you always get the best of everything. So we pretend perfection. And then what teens are doing is that they're looking at the Instagram models and the social influencers who spend 8 hours a day taking pictures just to get one good picture that they can post. And inevitably what's happening is that all of this pretend perfection is stirring up trouble, especially in teens, causing depression, it's limiting human interaction, and it's creating an inability to commit, right? So if we take a look at depression, what's happening is that teenagers are struggling with feelings of inadequacy, anxiety, a lack of confidence, and to an extent, they are on medication for depression. And a lot of that has to do because teens are basing their self-identity and their self-worth on how many likes they get on that post that they just put up. So if they don't, the more likes that they get, the more value they give to themselves. And inevitably also, always being behind a screen limits human interaction. It impacts the ability for them to have a healthy life and real life relationship. And also all this false perfection leaves people with the inability to commit to one person. Because really, if you think about it, why date someone when there's 100,000 other people on Instagram or on Tinder to choose from? You can just keep swiping until you find another one. So what is also happening is what we're calling the hookup culture. And just to clarify, a hookup culture is one that accepts and encourages casual sexual encounters, including one-night stands and other related activity, without necessarily including emotional bonding or long-term commitment. So it's just basically saying it's okay to have a one-night stand. It's okay that you're not going to have any other type of relationship with this person. And to make it clear, social media isn't the only thing that's influencing the hookup culture, but it's definitely one of the factors. But then you also have things like movies and TV lyrics and social media posts that have distorted really what a healthy relationship looks like. If you look at TV now, couples or about family, cohabitation, and out of wedlock, they're all considerable accepted norms. And one-night stands are perfectly okay. So this just leads teens and young adults to seek instant gratification. Tinder happens to be an extremely popular app. It makes 12 million matches a day because people are always now searching for instant gratification, instant affection, instant pleasure, and they lose the ability to truly connect. I was reading an article recently on Vanity Fair, out of all places, and they basically stated the following. Tinder is one of the many things at the root of today's hookup-fueled dating apocalypse. Because essentially that is what's happening. Teens aren't dating anymore. Young adults aren't dating anymore. They're just hooking up. So research was recently done about, amongst some college students, and they found that 60 to 80% of college students have had some sort of hookup experience, and that most college students have had more actual hookups than they've had actual first dates, right? So they're having sex with people before they actually go on a first date. And if you ask them why, their answer is because they said that hooking up with someone was less intimidating and less intimate than actually going out on a first date with them. Because they're now in the state of talking and getting to know someone is too intimate. But I can have sex with you today and never see you tomorrow, and that there's no intimacy in that. So then the question is, what can you do about it, right? So along with the National Resource Center, what we've done is we've decided to do dating in real life. And what that is a campaign that teaches people how to date. Once you know something and you figure out how to do that thing, it becomes less intimidating. But you may not be willing to go out there and say, hey, I really don't know how to date. That might feel like a really stupid question, or you want to be the dumb one in the room. So let's figure out how to get that story to them, how to get them those dating 101 tips that teaches them this is how you do it, this is how you do it in real life. So what we're trying to do is now take those negative messages that they've gotten from social media or from TV or from wherever that they're getting it from, and let's counteract it with positive messages about their identity, their self-worth, and then layer in positive messages also about dating, relationships, and marriage. And you can check out this resource under Instagram at dating_IRL. It's also in the downloadable section of this broadcast. But definitely, if you have teens and if you have young adults, you may now want to go home and take away all their devices and lock them in a room and never let them do anything again. But that's really not going to work. So we just have to go now. Yeah, take it back to the basics. You got to teach them how to date. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Annie.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for all that information as well, and great resources from your organization. And to continue off of what Sarah was talking about and to provide some more information and resources for you all about starting that conversation about dating in real life, I'm going to spend the next few minutes talking about how young people and how you all can help young people identify if they're in an unhealthy or abusive relationship, and also help them pivot towards being in healthier relationships, whether those are dating relationships, whether they're friendships, family dynamics, roommates, teammates, really whomever. We're all in relationships. We can all try to have healthier relationships. So to get started, the story behind One Love I want to share because, this happened to a young person. So One Love was founded back in 2010 after a young woman named Youre Love. At the time, she was a senior lacrosse player at the University of Virginia, and she was unfortunately killed by her ex-boyfriend just about 3 weeks before her college graduation. This was an incredible tragedy. It really shook up her community and those around her, made national headlines. But what her family didn't know at the time was that Youre was in an abusive relationship. They thought this was a random act of violence, a drunken night gone wrong, but in reality there were so many red flags present in her relationship that led up until this point. And everyone in her life saw those red flags. They just didn't know what they meant. They didn't know what they were seeing, and they didn't know how dangerous they really were. So Youre's family decided that there was an opportunity to start talking to young people in a language that they can understand. What if every young person had a common language and a common framework for understanding the red flags of an unhealthy, abusive relationship, and also understood what a healthy relationship actually looks like? And they realized, Youre's death was 100% avoidable if those in her life and Youre herself had the education and the tools to really understand the difference between healthy and unhealthy. So that is why we seek to reach the age range of 16 to 24. They're actually 3 times more likely to be in an abusive relationship than at any other time
in a person's life, but oftentimes young people have the least amount of education about what those signs are. So the way that we start conversations with young people is through workshops, and these are video-based, so creating video content that is engaging and relatable, and when you watch it, you can make a personal connection to what this issue really looks like, and then apply it to your life through peer-to-peer conversations. So on the screen, you'll see just an outline of some of the different video workshops that we have. We started with the escalation workshop a few years ago and have taken that to schools across the country, all 50 states, and have since created more video content because we know young people are really hungry to start these conversations and to talk openly and honestly with one another about what this looks like. There's oftentimes not a place for them to talk about, and we hear all the time, this is the first time I've had a conversation like this. But it's so important, again, because all of us are in relationships and always will be in relationships, to have those candid discussions with one another. All of these videos are available on our website. We're going to watch one of them a little bit later on. But they have corresponding discussion guides that go with them. So no matter where you are in the country, if you want to use these resources, you can go to our website. Many of them are also on Vimeo and YouTube. You can play that video and you can use the corresponding discussion guide that's downloadable from our website to start that conversation with young people or even with adults who are in youth-facing positions or who are parents or coaches to talk about this. All right. All of our videos also have the tone of a friend who is offering advice to another friend, because as much as we want young people to go to adults first and we tell them, talk to a trusted adult, these are the resources around you. The reality is that they're going to talk to another friend first. And if their friends are equipped with understanding about what the red flags of an unhealthy relationship really are, then they'll be able to guide them toward talking to an adult faster, going to a resource faster. We'll be able to connect them. So that is, and you'll see in a minute what the tone of our videos is. All of them are also based on the 10 signs of an unhealthy relationship, so that you can see what these behaviors actually look like in real life examples. And then we pair those with the 10 signs of a healthy relationship. And what's interesting is that social media and this digital age really exacerbates a lot of the unhealthy relationship behaviors. So intensity, a relationship that goes 0 to 100 really quickly, like Sarah was talking about relationships on Tinder, when you're able to just swipe and then immediately talk to this person and then maybe meet up in real life to hook up or to go on a date. That relationship is escalating very quickly. And that is a sign of a potentially unhealthy or abusive relationship, later on. Guilting. Why did you like that person's Instagram post? Or isolation. Give me your password so I can see who you're texting. Give me your location. Share your location with me so that I can know if you're really where you say you are. There's so many ways that technology and social media just causes these unhealthy behaviors to pop up even if people aren't in person. We're going to show a clip of a video called Behind the Post. But I'll just share a little bit about what this video is. It's part of an 8-minute video that looks at social media specifically and how it shows, like Sarah was talking about, the highlight reel of what's happening in someone's life. We post about the good things, and then we don't share the maybe unhealthy or abusive things that are happening in our relationships online. So when people are looking at that, when our friends or family members are looking at what we're posting, they're really just seeing this highly tailored highlight reel of what's happening. And so Behind the Post is a look at how, as the likes are coming in and the comments of, you all are such a perfect couple, you're so lucky, to be in a relationship with this person, y'all are relationship goals, what's really happening behind the post is highly unhealthy. So we will flip to the next video, which is called it looks at the unhealthy behavior of obsession. This is part of an 8-chapter series called Couplets. And I'll let you all take a look.
What are you so happy
and then
about?
we'd love to
She just
hear some
started
of your
following me on
thoughts afterwards.
Instagram. What are you so nervous about? She just started following me, like, everywhere.
Yeah, that's not love there at the end, when this person is just popping up all of the time. And so we use a video like this to start the conversation about setting digital boundaries. Where is that line? And would love to hear some of your all thoughts after watching that video. What words come to mind? Fear? Yes. Stalking, anxiety-inducing, someone who feels overwhelmed by this relationship. Absolutely. Someone acting in a possessive and abusive way. Thank you all. I agree. Control. Fabulous. And this certainly highlights the unhealthy behavior of obsession. If someone is texting you all the time, again, or liking every single one of your pictures in a way that makes you feel uncomfortable or wants to know your location, like I mentioned, those are all red flags, especially if it's happening consistently, of what an unhealthy or abusive relationship might be. We do have a poll question here as well. If you all could share, if you work with young people, especially in an educational sense, what is that age range? A lot of people working with high school age students. Awesome. Well, I hope that these resources are helpful for you all as you work with them. Thank you. We also have, and I want to mention, the 10 signs of an unhealthy and healthy relationship are over in the downloadable resources. If you want the list of those and explanation that goes along with each one. Oftentimes we have young people who will come up and say, oh, can I take a picture of that? I really want to send it to one of my friends. And it's a great conversation starter for them. And so like I mentioned, real life happens behind the post. What we see is the highlight reel of these likes coming in and comments about how perfect everything looks like when you're just scrolling through social media. But what happens is, especially at the beginning of a new relationship, it can create a perfect relationship paradox, where if you're only hearing how great everything looks like from your friends and your family based on social media, it can make it harder to open up if something unhealthy or abusive is happening or starts to happen a little bit later. It sets that expectation of perfection in a relationship. And it can also make it easier to brush those early warning signs, which are almost always emotionally abusive behaviors. Brush those under the rug. Easier when you're hearing from your friends and the people who have so much influence in your life about how perfect everything looks. But even with our very best friends and our family members, we have to acknowledge that we're not always in the room. So starting that conversation, especially at the beginning of a new relationship, makes it easier to talk in an open and honest way. If someone is checking in and saying, hey, I see that you're spending a lot of time with this person, how are things going at the start of a new relationship, then it won't seem weird if things take a turn later on for you to still be checking in and saying, you seem really stressed out lately, how are things going? Because you've set that expectation of discussion with your friends from the beginning. We also like to say, focus on the unhealthy behaviors and not the person. If you're able to stigmatize behaviors, then someone is less likely to become defensive in a situation. So instead of break up with this person, I don't understand why you don't see what I see. Instead, you can say, you seem really stressed out. How are things going? Or, I noticed that They always look over your shoulder at who you're texting. I know that would make me feel uncomfortable. How does it make you feel? Really focusing on how your friend feels in that situation. There's a great resource over on the side called Instead of Saying This, Say That, because young people are sometimes afraid to take that first step and talk to a friend. So we put a lot of good conversation starters in there. And if you want an extra resource to give to young people, or even just to have, for yourself, there is one on the side. Also want to mention our latest campaign, which is called Love Better, and it's that everyone deserves a healthy relationship, and that no matter what relationship you're in, we can all commit to bringing healthier behaviors into our relationships. There is a pledge associated with it on our website, so feel free to go there or to encourage the young people that you work with to go there and take that pledge and really think about, what am I going to do to bring communication, trust, honesty, independence, equality, all those really good, healthy relationship behaviors into mine. Lastly, I want to share that we have really easy ways for anyone who wants to become a trained facilitator for these workshops to participate through a virtual training process. If you are interested in bringing these videos and discussions to your community, to a school where you are, if you want to host a workshop with parents or other youth-facing professionals in your area, please feel free to reach out. It's likely that we have something going on around where you are, and we would love to connect you with what's happening, or have you lead the charge where you are. So thank you. Here's my contact information. I know they've also put it on a link on the side, but with that, I will hand it over to Eleanor. Take it away.
Thanks, Annie. So I'm Eleanor. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm really excited to be here with you all today. So I work at Futures Without Violence, and for those of you who are not familiar with our work, we're a national domestic violence and sexual violence prevention nonprofit. We're based in San Francisco. We work all across the country. We have offices in D.C. and Boston and New York as well. And we do a whole bunch of things, but the main thing I'm here to talk to you about today is our program, That's Not Cool, which we launched in 2009. It's our teen dating violence prevention initiative, and it really focuses on raising awareness about digital dating abuse. So I wanted to just sort of start off sort of a great transition from the content we've heard before this, but just sort of talking about, what do we mean when we say digital dating abuse? It can be a little bit of a tricky phrase. So digital dating abuse is essentially when technology is used as a tool or a method for abuse. So the definition that we use here is when someone repeatedly controls, pressures, or threatens someone they're seeing or dating through their phones or online. So Annie actually mentioned a few great examples of digital abuse in her presentation, but just to recap, this could include anything from stalking on social media, pressuring a partner for the passwords to their email or their Facebook accounts, sort of pressuring them to maybe have the GPS locator on their phone enabled, or pressuring someone to text nude or intimate photos. And the main idea here is that digital abuse has many of the same themes we see in other types of abuse, so mainly issues of privacy, pressure, and control. So it's really sort of using technology to invade someone's privacy, to pressure them into things, or to try and control their behavior in some way. So why do we specifically focus on digital dating abuse, that's not cool? Well, first of all, because unfortunately it's really common among teens. Almost every teenager has a cell phone. You heard earlier about how ubiquitous social media use is. I don't think that comes as a surprise in this day and age. Social media and our phones play a huge role in terms of how we connect with each other. So it's really no surprise that these technologies also play a huge role in young people's dating lives. And we know that 1 in 4 teens is going to experience some form of abuse or harassment through technology. So it's really critical that we start these conversations early. And the second reason we focus on digital dating abuse, not only is it really common, but it is also very frequently coupled with other types of abuse. So this stat, I think, is really important to keep in mind. 52% of teens who are experiencing digital dating abuse are also experiencing physical abuse. So if a teen is experiencing some type of digital abuse, it's likely not the only type of abuse they are experiencing. So the odds are that there are other concerning things going on as well, maybe offline. So it's really important to address what's happening online or through technology because it can often be sort of indicative of other issues. And lastly, one of the biggest reasons we specifically address digital dating abuse is because it is really isolating for teens who are experiencing it. So we know that people who are experiencing any type of abuse often feel really isolated and alone, find it really difficult to disclose, what's happening? There we go. To disclose the abuse to other people in their lives. But with digital abuse, there's an added hurdle, and that's that teens perceive this sort of generational technological divide between themselves and the adults in their lives. So their parents, their teachers, teens have this sense that particularly when it comes to issues of technology, the adults in their lives just sort of won't get it, right, and won't understand. So they keep it to themselves. So only 9% of teens who are experiencing digital abuse seek help. And they're not going to parents, they're not going to teachers, they're not going to the adults in their lives. They're going to friends, they're going online, they're searching for answers, and that's where we really hope we can provide some helpful content for teens. So that brings us to our That's Not Cool initiative. And That's Not Cool, again, it's a teen dating violence prevention initiative that we launched at Futures Without Violence to promote awareness for digital dating abuse and to promote healthy relationships. So what it is it's really a community of youth leaders and adult allies, which is what we call sort of adult advocates, but probably all of you on the webinar right now, we would refer to you as adult allies, so allies of young people, who are working together to bring awareness to the issue of digital dating abuse and teen dating violence. So That's Not Cool empowers young people to identify and prevent abuse both online and offline. And we do this a couple different ways. First, we educate. So our website, that'snotcool.com, serves as a space where teens can download resources, ask questions, and generally just sort of learn about abuse and healthy relationships. A lot of young people aren't taught explicitly how to tell the difference between a healthy and an unhealthy relationship. We talked about this a little bit earlier in the webinar. That content just unfortunately isn't available to all teens. And so we think it's really important to educate teens, to help them think critically about what type of behavior crosses the line, to help them identify abuse, and really, I think at the end of the day, identify what their boundaries are and what they are and are not comfortable with. We also organize teens, so we don't just provide information for them or educate them, we also ask them to take action. So we provide resources, we provide action toolkits and guidelines for events that teens can hold in their schools or in their communities, and we ask them to engage on social media and offline to sort of spread awareness in their friend groups or in their communities. We really want them to be the driving force of change on this issue. And that really brings us to this sort of focus on youth-driven violence prevention. We really emphasize youth-driven and youth-led work. We believe young people understand this issue deeply. We know many of them see these types of behaviors, experience these types of behaviors. We believe they are the experts on their own lives, and they really have the power to change the culture around abuse and relationships. So we promote a model of youth leadership and youth empowerment. So we work with young people, we let them drive our content, and we really try to spotlight their work and the things they're doing in their communities to make change. And, from that, a huge component of the work that we do at That's Not Cool is online organizing. So it's a national initiative. We're focused on digital technology. So we're really reaching teens where they are, which is online. So we produce content for social media that's meant to be activating, right, that young people can relate to. We invite them to engage with our content through mini campaigns or polls or online events like tweet storms or live Q&A sessions, right? Going on Facebook Live is a great way to engage teens online. We've built games on our site, like you'll see here the Cool Not Cool quiz, which is really fun. It's sort of a pick your own adventure game where the user gets to decide, sort of they're presented with a story, and they get to decide if relationship behavior is cool or uncool. So again, meant to really sort of educate them on where is your line, where does that behavior cross the line. So we're creating tools and games that young people can interact with. And we manage our social media and our website community really closely. We ask questions, we regularly post new content or engage in conversation online. We're very actively engaging in conversation and dialogue with teens on social media and on our website. So if you're curious to learn more about That's Not Cool, or if you'd like to explore some of our resources, there are a few ways to get involved that I just wanted to highlight here. The first is just to head to our website, that'snotcool.com, and check out the Adult Allies section. We have an entire resource library for adult allies, again, that's all of you, to help you work with teens to prevent digital abuse, to help you organize teens. There's activities, there's guides, there's just tons of great stuff in there. We also have an ambassador program for teens across the country who want to be more involved in making change in their school or local community. So you can learn more about that on our website and definitely refer any teens you know to check it out. It's a great opportunity for them to get more involved. And also on our website, we have a whole host of games and activities, including the Cool Not Cool quiz that I told you about earlier. And lastly, it's never too early to start planning for National Teen Dating Violence Awareness and Prevention Month, which is every February. It's a great time to activate and engage your community around this issue. We always launch a campaign in February to raise awareness and spotlight this issue, and we'd love for you to do the same. Sort of the louder we can be on this issue, the louder our voices can be, the better. And stay in touch. Visit our website, follow us on social media, and we'll be happy to stay connected with you all. And that's all for me. I'm excited to turn it back to Robin for some Q&A. And while we're waiting for Robin, just a reminder, you can ask a question by typing it in the Q&A pod located at the bottom right corner of your screen and clicking enter. We'll wait just a few minutes to give participants some time to submit their questions before we begin.
Thanks, Jackie. Okay, so that was a wonderful presentation. Thank you all for such great information. And I see that we have a few questions. I did want to mention to start with that I noticed in the poll that some of you actually work with younger children, younger than teens. And so I wanted to mention a resource that the Resource Center also offers. It's a children's activity book, My Family Album. So if you do work with younger children, it's targeting children ages 7 to 10 and focuses on healthy interpersonal skills as well as character education. And I want to echo some of the comments that have been made. It's never really too early to have those conversations. I just noticed in the news this past week about a 6-year-old who was being bullied, and his friend stepped in and wound up getting beat up. The charge was led by a 5-year-old. So clearly we need some conflict resolution skills as early as we can get them. So let me start with one of these questions that have come in. So there's a question about the videos. If you will have access to the videos, and yes, the videos are actually in the video links pod to the right-hand side of the screen, so you can access all those videos that have been referenced throughout today's presentation. The next question that has come up is about culturally specific issues related to this topic. So I'm going to start with Sarah because I know that Family Bridges offers some culturally specific resources for the Latino community. So if you would like to start, Sarah, and talk about that, and then we'll open that question up to Annie and Eleanor as well.
Sure. Could you repeat the question?
Do you have any resources that address culturally specific issues related to this topic?
Yes. So Family Bridges does, because 85% of the population that we serve are Latinos, are in Hispanic families. So we have a plethora of resources, particularly edutainment. That is one of the areas that we focus in. So education mixed with entertainment. Our radio series, Que Gente Mi Gente, is a Spanish radio soap opera that deals with topics of everything that a family or a couple could ever go through ever. And there is a lot of team-based relationship parts in there. Anything, you can check out our familybridgesusa.org for all that, as well as our social media. We constantly are posting a plethora of resources and tips and advice.
Awesome, thank you. Annie, how about your organization? Do you provide culturally responsive resources?
Sure, and to first talk about some videos, we have videos that show a variety of relationship and relationship types, several that highlight LGBTQ relationships, and we also have an entire blog section of our website that is written by people in different communities about how this issue affects them in their communities, so I would suggest checking that out as well.
Awesome, and how about you, Eleanor?
Yeah, I mean, I'll definitely echo what Annie said about just sort of the, our materials. We work hard to really reflect the diversity of relationships that, we know that young people who we work with are in and experiencing. And certainly, too, I mean, particularly when it comes to our ambassador program, our content is really driven by the young people that we work with. And so, when they have questions about, specific issues happening in their community or in their relationships, we reflect that and we answer those questions. We also have sort of a blog function for ambassadors to write stories about their communities that we really want to make sure that we're sort of reflecting and providing a space for that. One comes to mind. We had an ambassador who wrote this really beautiful story that's on the website about the idea of machismo in her community and how that sort of plays a role in dating abuse and sort of how folks in her community and how she relates to men in sort of romantic relationships. So yeah, absolutely. Definitely we have some good content up there.
Perfect. Thank you. So I'm going to direct this next question to Annie. The question is, what is a good way to start a conversation with someone who you worry might be in an abusive relationship? Could you give us just a couple of tips?
Yes, and let me make sure. To start the conversation with someone that you're worried is in an unhealthy or abusive situation.
Correct.
Is that right?
Correct.
Perfect. Well, I think the first thing is, I think there's a three-pronged approach. First, you can directly start the conversation with that person, starting it off and knowing that it might not be, it's going to be many conversations. It's not going to be the first conversation that this person all of a sudden has a wake-up moment, but entering that conversation on a positive note, making sure that you're speaking in a really non-judgmental, supportive, loving way, stigmatizing behaviors like we talked about earlier. I think you would think it would be weird if I drove all the way to your college campus if you weren't picking up my text messages. That's an example of stigmatizing a behavior. And then giving that person options. Would you be comfortable speaking to a trusted adult? Maybe it's a coach, maybe it's a parent, accessing resources that are online, talking to an advocate or someone at your local domestic violence center or agency in your community or also at the national level. You can also talk to another friend first. So talking to someone and saying, have you seen anything weird? My gut kind of tells me that something's off in this situation, but I'm not quite sure. If you see something, you tell me. If I see something, I'll tell you. We'll put it together, get a better understanding of what's happening, and then figure out how to address the situation. And I think the third prong is going directly to resources. I think there's also sometimes a misconception that you have to be experiencing the unhealthy or abusive situation to seek out resources, but they are absolutely there for anyone who might be worried about a friend or a family member. So just picking up the phone and calling someone or going online. Loveisrespect.org is a really amazing website where you can chat with an advocate or text an advocate. So I would say those are my 3 prongs for starting that conversation.
Awesome. Okay, well, so Eleanor, I'd like you to take this one. If someone is experiencing digital abuse, what are the first steps that you would have them take?
Yeah, so this is a great question. I just want to echo everything Annie said. I think one resource that I particularly want to speak to that I bring up to the young people I work with all the time is that at Futures Without Violence, we produce a ton of resources, and one of the materials that we create are called safety cards. And they're just little cards. They fit in your wallet. They open up sort of like a brochure, and there's just really basic information, right? Is this happening in your relationship? Have you considered? Do you feel safe? Here are some resources. And it's just a great sort of little handheld, really easy conversation starter. And so I find that a lot of the young people, when I go around the country and speak at schools or conferences, the majority of young people who come up afterwards to talk to me are not saying, I was in this situation. They're saying, a friend of mine is in this situation and I don't know what to do. And I don't know how to start the conversation. And I will say, here is a safety card. One of the easiest things you can do is hand the safety card to your friend and just say, I'm concerned about some things I'm seeing. I want to give this to you and I'm here for you if you want to talk. Right? It's sort of like the easiest low-impact way to get your point across and just sort of provide that resource to your friend without having to have the conversation if that seems too hard. I think the suggestions that Annie provided are totally right and exactly what we would suggest in terms of starting that conversation in person. And also, when we're talking about 13, 12, sometimes 11, 10-year-olds, starting that conversation can be really hard, and so having some sort of, just something in your hand that you hand them can be really, really useful as a conversation starter for young folks in terms of having these conversations with their friends. So I'm happy to send a link to that particular safety card I'm talking about. We have them all available for free and download on the Futures Without Violence website. You can go to our resource library. We also find that these are great tools for just universal education. So not just handing those safety cards out to the people that you think are in trouble, but handing them out to everyone all the time, right? Because they just can get people starting to think about, oh, what is a healthy relationship? What do I want out of a relationship? What does abuse look like? Just starting, again, just getting as much information as we can out there is always recommended.
Awesome. So one of our participants is curious about data and would like to know what kind of tracking you guys are doing to determine whether or not your programs are helpful to others. Do you get feedback or do you do any types of evaluations? So we'll start with Sarah, and if you could give us kind of a real quick snapshot of what you guys do in terms of determining the effectiveness of your work, and then we'll go to Annie and then Eleanor.
Yeah, so we are driven by data. A lot of the things that we do, whether it's storytelling or whether our workshops or whether it's our social media posts, is all based off of data. We have an internal numbers guy who, if it's a service that we've provided, so if it was a workshop, if it was a theater event, it was something that people went to in person, we have surveys that we do beforehand, after, and 6 months later and 2 years later, so we can see if that was actually effective. And then we do random surveys or focus groups to determine whether or not things are working. And then as far as digital content goes, that's all analytical information. What are people clicking on? What kind of search items are they using in order to get to us? So we internally have a lot of data.
Cool. All right. So Annie, you want to tell us what you guys track?
Sure, and I think it's pretty similar to what Sarah mentioned. All of our resources are research-based as well. So when we are creating new content, when we're creating those discussion guides, we're making sure that it is research-based based on what is happening to teens and young people out in the world. And then we also, with our workshops, make sure that we're collecting a lot of data on the back end. Last week I was just down in Broward County in Florida, working with the Broward County Public Schools through a partnership with them, doing pre-test, post-test, for workshops with them, being able to run all of that to see, was this effective? What are young people telling us, so that as we create more content, more resources, they can really drive what is happening. We're also doing evaluation with the Department of the Navy to see how this looks like in other communities, working with the military. So those are just a couple ways that we collect data, and have an internal person like Sarah's organization who runs all of that analytic good stuff as well.
All right, Eleanor, how about you?
Yeah, so in terms of sort of collecting data and analytics on our own resources, we certainly do, collect social media insights and Google Analytics on our website to just learn more about, are people using the resources? What are they finding most helpful? What's really resonating with our audience? So we certainly take insights just, sort of from the materials we have in existence. I think we're also really fortunate to have, in the form of the ambassador program and our social media followers, access to sort of real-time feedback from young people themselves. So it's really easy for us to say, sort of what's coming up for you, what do you like, what questions do you have, what do you want us to talk about, what do you think of this new resource we're developing, what should we include, what should we not include. So just sort of posing questions and inviting them to be more actively involved. It's just sort of a great resource to have that sort of real-time feedback from teens that we're working with.
Awesome. So we have several other questions. Let's see. Let's take this one. Do you have any resources that discuss red flags that an individual or friend might see within a relationship? Seems to me like that might fit with the 10 healthy versus unhealthy relationship attributes that you mentioned. Annie, what do you think?
Yes, I definitely agree, and I think a good resource is also watching some of those videos that correspond with the different behaviors, so that you can see an example of that playing out, and start that conversation like we've talked a lot about today.
Awesome. Eleanor, are you familiar with a good risk assessment tool that is used to determine if a youth might be particularly at risk for this type of violence?
In terms of at risk, I mean, we sort of don't necessarily talk a lot in the language of being particularly at risk for dating abuse, just because, we kind of take, again, that universal education approach of essentially we kind of assume that all teens are at risk for this kind of behavior, unfortunately, just because we know it's so pervasive. And so we really want to reach as many young people as we can with this education and with this information, this knowledge, preemptively before they're at risk or before this is happening, so that they sort of already have an understanding of a healthy versus an unhealthy relationship. I think in terms of there are some quizzes on, I think someone mentioned earlier, Love is Respect, the teen dating violence hotline, that are really great, that can sort of, go through, some questions that help you evaluate your own relationship to see sort of where on the spectrum it is. And you can sort of do that with a friend's relationship if you're nervous or uncomfortable and not sure if you need to sort of get involved or if you want to talk to them about it. There are just tons of great resources on Love is Respect that I would recommend checking out.
I would agree, and I really appreciate your perspective on basically everyone is at risk. Unfortunately, domestic violence, intimate partner violence, and family violence are issues that cross socioeconomic lines. So there really isn't a risk assessment, if you will. There aren't specific factors that would indicate that somebody is specifically at risk for violence, because it is so pervasive across socioeconomic lines. And then there are all kinds of other factors that can play into that. So I really appreciate your perspective on that. We do have in the Resource Center's library, we do have a violence prevention toolkit. which focuses on both child maltreatment and intimate partner violence. And it's a great resource. It's available in PDF, but it's also available in our virtual training center as a course, and I think folks who have questions around this might find that very interesting. Another resource that's very helpful that goes along the lines with some of the comments that our presenters have made today is the Power and Control Wheel, which highlights the different ways, as we've heard some different comments. It does it in a very nice, succinct way, highlight the different ways, things like isolation, manipulation, financial management and so forth that people do kind of abuse each other. And so I think those are good resources. So here's an interesting one. When tackling the issue of abuse, we sometimes encounter issue of gender stereotypes that reinforce abusive behavior. When educating folks, parents, for example, how can we keep these folks engaged when we are challenging what may be a core belief for them? So I'm going to take this one, and I'm going to talk about it real briefly in the context of another comment that was made on, what do you suggest when you find out that someone is the victim of digital abuse? I will actually share with you that my son, when he was a senior in high school, was dealing with a young lady who was the abuser. And unfortunately, there had been an incident at school, but when they investigated the incident initially, they thought he was the aggressor, and so they had kind of one response, and then when they realized she was the aggressor, they actually did not pursue their own policy around these issues. And then the incident of the digital abuse came up. There were 135 texts that came in, and so I actually went up to the school with his phone and requested to meet with the counselor, the dean, the school resource officer, and the parent of this child. And we were able to get to the bottom of it, but to the point that was made earlier, we were only able to do so because I had that kind of relationship with my son that he was willing to show me his phone and what was going on, and then I was able to step in and go down to the school and do something. So I think this is a very valid concern that a lot of times we think about gender stereotypes being male-directed violence towards women, and unfortunately the data is increasing. There are more female-to-male violent incidents, and some of the most volatile relationships are in the LGBT community. So we do have to think differently about this. We do have some resources in the Resource Center Library, and there are a number of other resources, as we've heard our presenters talk about, that I think would be helpful in overcoming some of that conversation. So let's see. We have another. Does anybody have, oh my goodness, we're getting lots of questions here, so I'm trying to scroll through them all. What resources would you direct middle school teachers to? Annie, you want to take that?
Sure. The couplet video that I showed earlier is part of an entire middle school curriculum. So we find that a lot of health educators or counselors or even parents will host workshops with middle school students using that 8-part or 8-chapter couplet series. The discussion guide is downloadable straight from our website. We're actually coming out with the newest iteration of that this week if you want to wait till next week to make sure that you get the most up-to-date version from our website. But if you reach out to me, I'm also happy to send that along to you. It includes lesson plans at the end, activities for students. It's based on social emotional learning and the core competencies of that. So I would recommend checking out the couplets curriculum.
Awesome.
This is Eleanor, too, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, jump in.
Yeah, so I just wanted to jump in and say, so yes, thank you, Annie, and That's Not Cool materials similarly are also sort of designed to be, to work anywhere in that age range for middle and high school. So, if you have middle school students, those That's Not Cool materials should be really applicable. If you're looking for something that's even more specific to the middle school age range, Futures Without Violence actually a few years ago launched an initiative called Middle School Matters, which was a huge program with, pilot sites, and it generated so much information and content and recommendations for teachers to do healthy relationship education with middle schoolers. So you can find that. There's actually a whole microsite for Middle School Matters on our Futures Without Violence website. So you can go there as well for more information.
Awesome. Great. So the next question is, how do we get parents and guardians on board to discuss this issue at home? And how do we enhance a collaboration and communication between parents and advocates? Anybody want to take that one?
Sure.
I'm happy to, this is Annie. Oh, go ahead, Sarah. You got it. You got it.
Sure. At least for us, what we've noticed that works really well is, again, because we work so much with edutainment, we get them to have conversations by entertaining them first. So we talk about topics that they would probably never talk about together, but since it's presented in such a non-threatening manner, eventually what happens is that they start having these conversations in the car, or they'll listen to a podcast that we put out, or they listen to the radio drama series that we have, or they went to a theater show, and all of a sudden it opens up a door. So I think the least intimidating thing that you could do to have that conversation, especially if you don't have like a close one to begin with, you're more likely to be able to have that conversation later on.
Awesome. Others?
Yes, I think very similarly to Sarah, we like to, when we're going into a school and working with a group of young people, middle school, high school, college, doing a parent workshop at the same time and having people from the community also, the people from the domestic violence agency or the counseling center nearby to come in and form that direct relationship. But also when you're able to show the same content to kids and parents simultaneously, then they have a neutral space to start the conversation. It doesn't have to be what's happening in your life specifically, but what did you think about that scene in the video? Have you ever seen something like that in a friend's relationship? And it opens up that door, like Sarah was saying, for that conversation starter. We also have a resource called, such a long name, but Start the Conversation, a guide for adults to talk to the young people in their life about healthy and unhealthy relationships. And what we did was tailor it so that you can use it with any of our video content, but the questions are more general. And then at the end of it, we worked with groups of experts in the field as well as focus groups of survivors of dating violence and asked them what was really helpful for you in navigating this experience. And many of them said it was the men in their lives stepping up and having a conversation with them and knowing that they had their backs. But that's a really great resource that is also downloadable from our website as well.
Awesome. Anybody else want to contribute to that? All right. So one more question here. Would you be able to partner with smaller organizations to help them collect data through your apps? Is that a possibility? Since you guys are collecting data already, could you partner with smaller organizations to help them collect data on the folks they're working with?
This is
Sarah. Go ahead. Annie.
Go ahead, Sarah. You're good. Go ahead.
That's an excellent question. And there are ways that can definitely happen, especially if you are connected to technology or are willing to enter into that realm of technology through, mobile platforms and whatnot. There is ways to do that. But I will defer this one now to Annie since she seemed to have also an answer.
I have somewhat of an answer also. But if you use any of our resources, the videos and discussion guides in a workshop format, we have a post-survey feedback form that anyone can use on our website, and you just enter in, this is where I am, this is a school or community-based organization, whatever it is, and then we're happy to send you the feedback from that. So kind of a partnership in that if you want to use these resources, we can give you the data back on that.
Okay. Does anyone have any suggestions for good books or sites other than your own that might provide good information on signs of a youth involved in a risky relationship? Any other suggestions?
You know, Eleanor mentioned this, I mentioned this earlier, but loveisrespect.org is such a fabulous place.
Okay.
Exactly what I was going to say. Yeah, I was just going to echo that they just have such an extensive resource library and quizzes and, downloadable Q&A things and, top 10 lists, and it's just a really, really great resource. So I would highly recommend going to Love is Respect.
Awesome. All right, so here's another question. This attendee works with 16 to 18-year-olds who live in a supervised apartment living setting, and they are concerned on how to communicate with these kids on this topic, but they need to get past the it'll never happen to me mindset that it seems that so many of these kids have. Any suggestions for getting past the it'll never happen to me mindset? Amy, why don't you start with that one, given the nature of how your organization began?
Yeah, sure. I think when you're able to get them to watch something that shows a relatable situation, they can have that moment of internal reflection and say, oh, wait, maybe I have seen these signs in my life. And that's really the reason that we use film-based workshops, so that someone's able to make that personal connection when watching a video or film. Most of ours show real people in the videos. But then in that peer-to-peer discussion, you're able to hear from all of the people around you that you spend so much time with about the things that you are seeing. When you look at that 10 signs, the 10 signs of an unhealthy relationship, the reality is that probably all of us on this webinar have done one of those things at some point. So it's really, it doesn't mean that we're bad people. It means we have this opportunity to love better. But they are such common things that when you're able to start the conversation in that way, I think it drives home the reality of how this can happen to absolutely anyone, whether it's a physically abusive relationship at a really high level of violence happening, or just an emotionally abusive situation, an unhealthy relationship.
All right, thanks. So Eleanor, here's a question specifically for you. Do you collect data on what young people decide is cool and not cool? The participant thinks it would be interesting to be able to see what they define as cool or not cool in a relationship versus what we more experienced folk think is cool or not cool.
That's a great question, and actually if you go to the Cool Not Cool quiz, which you can find on the That's Not Cool website, actually the way that it works is it sort of walks you through a story, and at each stage along the way, the user, the person playing the game, is asked to sort of vote, was that particular behavior that you just read about cool or not cool? And the second you answer, it immediately takes you to another screen where the results pop up. And you're able to see, right, 75% of respondents said it was cool, whatever. You're able to sort of immediately see the results of how the audience has voted. And so we don't specifically say you're wrong or right? But we sort of reflect what the majority has said back to them. So in that sense, yes, absolutely, that the data for sort of who has said what is cool and what is not cool is immediately available on that tool.
Awesome, thank you. So we have another question on here where the question is referencing the fact that there are parents who may have issues of unhealthy relationship behaviors themselves and are starting to see some of these issues occurring with their teen, and how might the parent address this? That's a really complex issue. We know from the Average Childhood Experiences study that children who witness violence, that it really counts towards the adverse childhood experiences scoring, if you will, in much the same as direct violence towards the child counts. And so it's really one of those complicated issues where if the parent is starting to see these issues with the child, the parent is going to have to be willing to work on their own relationships so that they can model positive, healthy relationships. They can certainly talk to the child and use all of these resources that we've discussed here today to have those conversations, but it is a difficult conversation to have when you're saying, do as I say and not as I do. As parents, those of us who are parents know that can be a difficult conversation to have. So I would encourage you to look at the Violence Prevention Toolkit resources and to work holistically with those families where there may be abusive relationship behaviors experienced at the parent level as well as the teen. And I'll also mention that in that situation that I shared earlier about my son, the young lady that he was having issues with, it turned out that there was a history of domestic violence in her family as well. So it is common. Children learn what they live, and so it's very important that we're modeling healthy relationships, which is why we at the Resource Center are trying so hard to make sure that we're integrating relationship education skills, healthy relationship education skills, into all possible opportunities for families to have this information. There are a few other questions that may be worded slightly different but kind of get to the same topics. But if other questions have come in that we have not answered, we can consolidate those questions and make those answers available. There is this one final question I'll ask, and then we'll wrap things up with any final comments from our presenters. The question is, do you have cell phone apps where youth can have access to, or is everything basically online through the internet? So are your apps mobilely optimized? We'll start with Eleanor.
Sure. I think that question was referring to sort of like, is our content available in an app format, if I'm understanding that correctly?
Correct.
We don't have a That's Not Cool mobile app, but just last year we actually did launch an entirely new tool that is a native app. So it's available on Google Play and the Apple Store for App Store for apps, and it's called Respect Effect. And essentially, what it is it's a healthy relationship skill building app. So it's gamified. Young people, there's essentially a new challenge every day, and users are asked to complete the challenge for a certain number of points, and each challenge that they complete is actually practicing and building a skill that they need to have healthy relationships. So you're also educating them on what a healthy relationship looks like along the way, and you're giving them a space to actually practice those skills. It's called Respect Effect. It's available for free anywhere you get your apps for your phone, and you can also find more about that on our website, that'snotcool.com.
Awesome, thank you. Annie, how about you?
Sure. So similarly to Eleanor, we don't have a specific app, but everything we do have is very mobile friendly, and we are also extremely active on social media, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. People often share our videos that way, share them with their friends, their network. But we also have, and this isn't specific for teens, but we, with the research and folks at Johns Hopkins University, we created an app called the My Plan app, which is for people, if you're trying to assess the danger of a relationship, you can go on and look at the risk of that relationship, lethality indicators, and then there's an option for creating a safety plan for exiting that relationship or being connected to experts and professionals who can help you safety plan. So I will say that is more tailored for an older population, not so great for teens and the types of questions that it asks, but it is an app if you're looking for something.
Awesome. All right, Sarah, how about you?
For teens and specifically, we don't have an app. Lots of reasons for that. Teens are not going to be prone to download an app, so they're already on Instagram, they're already on Snapchat, those are the two, and YouTube. Those are like the three major things that they're on. So all of our content is based on one of those three. So we always just guide them usually to just Instagram, and then everything from there is mobile friendly. So if it's a YouTube video, the link will be on our bio, or the video is directly embedded into Instagram. So we're just trying not to reinvent the wheel, basically.
Awesome. Meet them where they are. That's
Yeah.
always a good strategy. Okay. Are there any final thoughts from anyone? All right. Well, if not, I will thank you all for participating and turn you back over to Jackie so that she can wrap things up with the closing details.
Great. Thank you, Robin, and thank you all so much for your expertise and willingness to share with us today. It was really helpful. And also thanks to all the participants for the wonderful questions you submitted. As the webinar concludes, there will be a brief survey that pops up on your screen. Please remember to provide your feedback using the survey as it helps us with planning for future webinars. Once you complete the survey, you'll be able to access your certificate of completion for attending the webinar. The survey link will also be sent out via email following the webinar in case you don't receive it now. If you have any additional questions or need access to any resources that you weren't able to download today from the webinar, you can email us at info@healthymarriageandfamilies.org. And to check out more of our resources and information, you can go to our website at healthymarriageandfamilies.org. All of the webinar materials